Hello Internet, and welcome to the final episode of Pokemon Generation 1. In the last episode, we showed the multiplayer in Pokemon Stadium, and this time, we'll be showing literally everything else I can think to show. We're going to start by talking about things I didn't show in the LP, and then move on to talking about unused content in the game, because, to be frank, I didn't miss as much as I thought. Also, I can't enter my home anymore. I'm raising Pokemon too. They taught me how to walk on doors. Don't tell anyone, but that Squirtle from Pokemon Stadium is now in Pokemon Blue. And yes, its original trainer is Stadio, which means you cannot nickname it. Yep. First of all, earlier in the series you may recall me commenting about these strange NPCs named Eric and Sarah in Fuchsia City. This guy says, "Where's Sarah? I said I'd meet her here." Well, Eric is the one you speak to outside in the zoo, but it is actually possible to find Sarah. In the Safari Zone, if you head into the first rest house... Where did my boyfriend, Eric, go? So they aren't boyfriend and girlfriend in any other localization, but they are in this one, and it may seem weird that these are just named NPCs in the middle of nowhere. I did technically speak to Sarah during the LP, by the way. It was just while we were going over the bios here, which took forever, and I just didn't bring it up again afterwards. This isn't important at all, but I figured I'd bring it up anyways. The names Eric and Sarah aren't really a reference to anything, but their Japanese names Koji and Atsuko are references to Koji Nishino and Atsuko Nishida. Snorlax's design was actually inspired by Koji Nishino due to his large appetite. He even had the nickname Kirby around the Game Freak office, and he still works on Pokemon games to this day for some reason. Nishida as well is an artist who works for the Pokemon Company to this day. As you can guess, both of them have worked at Game Freak for a very long time. Something I never showed that someone actually commented about earlier in the LP is, when it comes to using self-destruct or explosion, the way the self-inflicted damage from this works is strange. We're gonna start by using self-destruct. Got a knockout, cool. That might actually be bad. I don't know if it'll still work. I guess we'll see. If we use counter now... What? It's faster than Mew? Oh, Counter has negative priority. Okay. I'm gonna be completely honest. I am not certain that this move will work in single player. Okay. For real this time. And against Astrid this time. Okay. that I forgot. Oh, I forgot she named her Dugtrio that. Okay. Well, I suppose the first thing I need to do is explode. Alright, got off the explosion. That'll easily kill Dugtrio. Okay, now we switch into Mewtwo. After, oh god. Astrid seems fucked up because of all the Pokedex completion stuff. So, I guess Talarico. Let's use counter. And we need to switch in Astrid's game into Fly Dude double exclamation point, I guess. Okay. And it still didn't work. Alright, I'm gonna be completely honest. I know counter can counter your own recoil damage, and I know it applies to self-destruct and explosion. But I can't make it work, and Bulbapedia genuinely does not say anything about it. I could do further research. I have done further research in the past. But right now, I'm just gonna let you live in suspense knowing that it is possible. But hey, Let that serve as me saying I actually showed multiplayer battles in the Game Boy game. As I was trying to show, the way counter works in this generation is more complicated than I can really give it credit for, to be completely frank. But there are videos on YouTube that go into a lot more detail about it if you're curious. Okay, I wanted to have footage of, like, a battle against Dragonair going on in the background, just because, like, it would illustrate the point, I think, but this was the first try, and this is the rarest Pokemon you can catch by fishing here. So, my luck in Pokemon Let's Play strikes again, I suppose. One thing I didn't talk about is the fact that a lot of Pokemon had their catch rates change between Pokemon Red and Blue version and Pokemon Yellow as a result of the time capsule. They wanted to change it because what catch rate they has determines what item they get when transferred to Gold and Silver, and they knew that was going to be a mechanic. For some reason, Dragonair and Dragonite got caught in the crossfire, making them significantly harder to catch in Pokemon Yellow, and changing their time capsule held items from a Bitter Berry for both of them, which is associated with a catch rate of 45, to a Protein for Dragonair and an Antidote for Dragonite. I don't know. It is a little bit generous in the Safari Zone, at least, because Pokemon you catch through fishing don't really do anything. But, I mean, you're seeing the footage right now. About 6 Pokeballs, and then Dragonair got tired of it and ran, so yeah. Changing the catch rate is genuinely devastating, because it's the only Generation 1 game where you can catch Dragonair in the wild. I was somewhat wrong about the animations for moves like Thunderbolt. I started by saying these moves' animations were only changed in the Virtual Console release to make the flashing lights less intense. Then I corrected myself to say they were updated in the Western release of the games. Well, it turns out I was sort of right both times. While a lot of moves were made less visually intense in the initial Western release of Pokemon Red and Blue, they were actually changed again in the Virtual Console release, with a lot of moves that were missed the first time also being changed. This was to comply with more modern seizure protection standards. The moves that were changed in the Virtual Console versions were Blizzard, Bubble Beam, Confusion, Dream Eater, Explosion, Guillotine, Hyper Beam, Mega Kick, Mega Punch, Psychic Reflect, Rock Slide, Self-Destruct, Spore, and Thunderbolt. Seems like a lot of the things I have to talk about today are around Fuchsia City. The item that the item finder detects in the Safari Zone gate is actually a nugget. It's located at the coordinates 10-1, and the reason it doesn't show up is because this map was probably changed to be much smaller during development. Perhaps it originally looked more like the entryway to the Great Marsh in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and they simply forgot to remove the item. The last thing I can think to show for the Game Boy games is that Jinx's colors were changed in the International Virtual Console release of Pokemon Yellow, updating it to be the only Pokemon to use a new altered color palette that replaces black with a bright purple. This is a good change, but also, it's like such a bright purple that it's kind of a little distracting, because none of the other Pokemon use colors that bright, and that's saying something, because this is a Game Boy Color game, so all the colors are absurdly bright. On to Pokemon Stadium. First of all, if you transfer Partner Pikachu from Yellow version into Stadium, Pikachu will use cries from the anime voiced by Ikue Otani. This is a neat change that takes advantage of the awesome voice compression software in Pokemon Stadium borrowed from Factor 5 that was used in, like, Star Wars Rogue Squadron or whatever game was on the Nintendo 64. I love it a lot. This is a cool change, especially only for the Partner Pikachu. Another oddity related to Pokemon transferred to Stadium games is related to Missing No. If you view Missing No's stats in Pokemon Stadium, it will simply appear as a substitute Pokédoll. This is likely a placeholder that would appear when viewing any glitch Pokemon, just so the game doesn't crash, but that is why I use that model on the bio for Missing No instead of just slapping Missing No sprite on the image. This last thing in this segment that I want to talk about for Pokemon Stadium is at a weird in-between. It's technically unused, but only in international releases. In the Japanese version of Pokemon Stadium, Poké Cup doesn't exist, and in its place are 3 additional cups in the Stadium mode. Nintendo Cup 97, Nintendo Cup 98, and Nintendo Cup 99. These cups are super cool in that they're based on real-life official tournaments sponsored by Nintendo. In a way, you could say that they were the first real iteration of what is now known as Pokemon VGC. Each of these had unique rule sets with pretty restrictive bans against a lot of Pokemon. Nintendo Cup 97's rules were as follows. They're the same as Poke Cup in the final game. Instead of taking place in the Poke Cup arena, though, it takes place in the outdoor arena that's used for free battle mode, which itself is similar to the outdoor arena used in Japan's Pokemon Stadium 1, which is a very different game that I do not have time to go into that much detail about. Nintendo Cup 98 is where things get a little bit wild. Only 33 Pokemon are allowed to be used, and they are as follows. Beedrill, Fearow, Pikachu, Nidoqueen, Nidoking, Dugtrio, Primeape, Arcanine, Alakazam, Machamp, Golem, Magneton, Cloyster, Gengar, Onix, Hypno, Electrode, Exeggutor, Chansey, Kangaskhan, Starmie, Scyther, Jinx, Pinsir, Tauros, Gyarados, Lapras, Ditto, Vaporeon, Jolteon, Flareon, Aerodactyl, and Snorlax. All of these Pokemon were Pokemon that were available in Japan's first Pokemon Stadium, and many were used by the real-world finalists in the Nintendo Cup 97. There's a caveat, though. All Pokemon in this format must be between level 1 and level 30, greatly restricting the level-up moves that many of them can use. Luckily, a lot of them do get most of their best moves through TM anyway, but it is very restrictive. It's also worth noting that in round 2 of Nintendo Cup 98, after facing a single youngster, you actually face the real-world 1998 Pokemon League finalists in a random order. In Japan Stadium 1, this was possible with finalists from 1997's league. They all even have unique artwork specifically for Pokemon Stadium. These finalists are Yamazaki Mamoru, forgive me because I'm going to butcher all of these by the way, Yamauchi Tomoyuki, Hori Tomoyuki, Yanagisawa Shohei, I don't know, it's Japanese. Yoshikawa Shinji, that one's easy. Hori Tatsuya, and Hanamoto Norishige. I'm sorry. I am so sorry if any of them somehow see this. That was bad. I'll put each of their teams on screen. Forgive any mistakes, as I had to manually translate a page from the Japanese Pokemon Wiki to find these teams. They genuinely just don't exist on English fan sites, like at all, as far as I can tell. I do think you'll find it amusing to know that Google Translate initially translated youngster as bread-loving elephant. I'm never calling youngsters youngsters again. Regardless though, these teams are genuinely surprisingly pretty up to date with modern standards. Obviously the meta has changed significantly since 1998, but a lot of these movesets ain't too bad, especially considering how many times you need to replay the games to get multiple copies of TMs like Psychic, Blizzard, or Thunderbolt. This was an era before Pokemon Showdown, which only makes this more impressive. This is obviously a really cool thing for the developers to do, immortalizing people who play the game well in an official game. Game Freak would do this again in 2012 with the top 4 in each division of the Pokemon World Championships that year being added in the Pokemon World Tournament as DLC, meaning Wolf Glick is canon to the Pokemon universe. Unfortunately though, that content is lost to time as a result of the shutdown of Nintendo Wi-Fi connection, and I'm not even sure if you can download it using fan servers. What was I talking about? Oh right, Nintendo Cup 99. So, if 97 allowed most Pokemon and 98 banned most Pokemon, it only makes sense if 99 is a middle ground, right? Well, it is. The 25 Pokemon used by the finalists of the 1997 Pokemon League, as well as Mew and Mewtwo, are banned. This means Venusaur, Dugtrio, Alakazam, Golem, Magneton, Gengar, Hypno, Electrode, Exeggutor, Chansey, Kangaskhan, Starmie, Jinx, Tauros, Gyarados, Lapras, Ditto, Vaporeon, Jolteon, Snorlax, Articuno, Zapdos, Dragonite, Mewtwo, and Mew. Other than that, all Pokemon must be between levels 1 and 50, and that's all there really is to it. Clearing the Ultra Ball division of Nintendo Cup 99 is what unlocks the Doduo GB Tower in the Japanese version too. And that brings us to talking about unused content. To start with, in Pokemon Yellow, there's actually an unused wild Pokemon encounter mode. In this mode, the trainer will not send out any Pokemon, and the message, "Hurry, get away," will appear if you pick any option other than to run, which is a guaranteed escape. Obviously, this is never used in-game, but it was likely meant to be used wandering into the tall grass before Professor Oak captures Pikachu. The This mode can be forced using a game shark code, if you couldn't tell by the fact that this is clearly live commentary and I'm currently using the mode right now. I suppose it can be helpful if you want to avoid encounters to turn on this game shark code, but at that point just turn on a game shark code to make it so wild Pokemon don't appear. Yellow actually has a surprising amount of cut content unique to it. There's this song, which was supposed to be an encounter theme for Giovanni. It's best known these days for being the song that plays when you fuse Pokemon in a fan game, but I'll always remember being 13 and thinking it was the coolest sounding song that never played in a game. These days I think it sounds more grating than it is cool, but hey, that's fine. I'm almost old. While we're on the topic of unused music, there's an unused song meant for link trades that's in Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, and Silver. It sounds pretty broken, but when reconstructed, it's fine. It was meant to be played over 2 Game Boy systems, with one channel on one Game Boy and the second on the other. So, in Pokemon Red and Blue, there's this unused trade where you would trade a Butterfree for a Beedrill. In Red and Blue, this Beedrill's nickname would be Chiku Chiku. For some reason, they changed its nickname in Yellow, despite it still not being an implemented trade in the game. Its new name is Stinger. On top of that, Yellow added 2 more unused trades. A Mew for a Mew and a Pidgeot for a Pidgeot. Both of these would be named Matsumiya after Toshinobu Matsumiya in the Japanese version. But in the West, Bart the Mew and Marty the Pidgeot. I think you can probably guess what they're named after given the time period when this would have been localized. There are 15 unused Pikachu cries in Yellow version. I'll put a timestamp on screen for you if you want to skip these, because, you know, they're loud. If you don't want, please mind your headphones volume. Yet another thing that I think I already talked about. And another thing that's near Fuchsia City. In Pikachu's Beach, there's this unused 750 Radness points. This is not possible to achieve in-game. I think I said before, like, it's possible for robots. Not normally, no. Because it's literally just not implemented into the game. I have a feeling that 750 points is a, like, debug thing. They put it in just so, like, they could test winning the minigame. But, you know, adding it with a Game Shark code does make this minigame infinitely easier. So, I'll take it. I won't complain. Hell yeah, 9999 Radness points. Oh. Hell yeah! I'm so good at this game! There are also unused sprites for Pikachu's Beach that I'll put on the screen now. This is a graphical glitch probably caused by the Game Shark code. Okay. So, you know how if you lose to your rival in Pallet Town for the first time, he'll say, "Yeah, am I great or what?" Well, it turns out he has a lot more lines like that go unused. In fact, he has dialogue for winning every single rival battle in the game, all of which go unused for whatever reason. None of these are super interesting or anything, but I do find it somewhat strange that it went through the effort of writing all this dialogue and translating it, and just never implemented it. Pretty much every single NPC in the game has a complete sprite set, even if they're static and never move from their spot. This includes Giovanni, the entire Elite Four, Koga's unique sprite that went unused until Pokemon Yellow, Officer Jenny, Mr. Fuji, and even the Chansey in the Pokemon Center in Pokemon Yellow. This one is actually a bit interesting because the Chansey in the zoo was changed to use this sprite, but they actively stopped it from moving around like the other Pokemon in the zoo at all, despite the fact that sprites do exist for it to do so. He's just standing there, menacingly! This is likely just because they copy and pasted the NPC from the Pokemon Center into the zoo, but still, weird. Speaking of directions, there are unused dialogue options for taking a direction. I have no idea what these are meant to be used for. Mewtwo has 2 moves in its learn set that it cannot possibly learn in Generation 1 without being sent to the move relearner in Pokemon Stadium 2. These moves are Confusion and Disable. I find this one especially amusing because Confusion and Disable are actually both on Mewtwo's moveset in Super Smash Bros. Melee, along with Teleport, which it can only learn via TM in Generation 1, and Shadow Ball, which it can only learn via TM in Gen 2. Keep in mind, Melee was released during Gen 2, so it seems almost intentional that none of its moves can be learned without, like, some outside help, despite Smash being one of those games that really likes to tell you how brutal Mewtwo is as a Pokemon. I believe I mentioned this briefly in the past, but there's an unused trainer class simply called Chief. It seems that this was meant to be the president of Silphco, since his name in Japan is literally Silph's Chief. He uses the scientist sprite that many Silph employees use too, but he doesn't actually have a defined sprite or party. The game simply assigns the scientist sprite to him because it's the sprite that comes after Chief in the game's registry of sprites. This guy also calls this, like, old man in this room Chief, but I don't think this is who they meant in the actual game's code. I think this is just another guy called Chief. There's also the unused Bird type, which belongs to many, many glitch Pokemon. It's popular belief that this type was replaced at some point during development with the Flying type, and the Bird type simply remained in the game's data with none of its properties. Adding the type to a Pokemon doesn't change its advantages or weaknesses at all, it's literally just filler. Which is interesting. Last thing before moving on to Stadium's unused content. Red, Blue, and Yellow have a lot of unused items. This includes several badges, including some that just aren't real, so I guess we know how Gary got all those now. But there are also TM versions of all 5 HM moves, listed as TM51 through TM55. These are fully functioning, and I wish they were in the game instead of HMs because HMs suck and I hate them. So, I don't really have much to say about Pokemon Stadium. I'll start by mentioning that technically, Pokemon Stadium's international release retains support for Pokemon Green version as a separate game, but it goes unused because Green was only released in Japan and Japanese Generation 1 games aren't compatible with other languages of Stadium. If you have the mythical English release of Pokemon Green lying around though, Stadium will recognize it. This fact is so strange to me. There are also several Pokemon that have unique animations that are either impossible or very rare to be able to view. One of these is Aerodactyl when using Earthquake, who T-poses and spins around in a silly little circle. Aerodactyl didn't get access to Earthquake until Generation 2, but it does get Mimic in Generation 1, so this isn't necessarily impossible to view. Trading it back from Generation 2 is the easiest way to see this, but if you're able to get it to pull Earthquake from an opponent using Mimic, you can watch it just the same. There's also a rare animation for Venusaur when using Earthquake or Fissure, which is impossible to view without Mimic until Pokemon Colosseum on the GameCube, since Earthquake wasn't added to Venusaur's Learn set until Generation 3. This one creeps me out a little, but so do most of Venusaur's animations in Stadium until Battle Revolution. Pikachu obviously has unique animations for using Surf and Fly, but did you know it also has one for using Confusion or Psychic? Pikachu has never been able to learn these moves, so this one is only viewable using Mimic or hacking. I love this one. And no, that's not just because it's Nintendo 64 Pikachu, although I am biased. With that stuff all said and done, at this point in the video, I'm going to give way for things that were suggested to be talked about in the comments of the beta version of this video that was uploaded probably a few days ago at this point. So, let's go into some of those things. If it's just one thing, that's going to be really embarrassing because I recorded a whole new commentary for this part. Do you remember back when we first got to Lance's room and I tried to surf back down through the gym statue to get back to Agatha's room, and it didn't work, but I swore I remembered it working? Turns out it does work, I was just doing the glitch wrong. Instead of surfing directly on that specific statue, you want to use the same glitch you used to get through the sailor to go back to the SS Anne. Doing this allows you to go right through the statue, through the bottom of the other statue. You can walk all the way down the path that leads up to Lance, and then just exit to Agatha's room. There's no way to get any further back from here. Like, you can't go back to Bruno and Lorelei and then leave. But this is something you can do. Something funny is if you walk back into Lance's room, you'll walk down the path automatically again, but you will actually walk right through the doors because there's already a flag set to keep them closed, so... yeah, I don't know, it's just funny. I enjoy this, and I think it's funny. That's why it's in the video. Okay, bye. Pancake Arborman suggested showcasing this glitch, where we start a battle with a Staryu that's about to level up, and we were actually just gonna switch right into Onix. And from here, we're just gonna beat the shit out of this Rattata using our level 17 Onix. Staryu will grow to level 31. And Staryu is evolving. So, the reason this happens is because certain Pokemon share index numbers with certain items. In this case, Onix shares an index number with the Water Stone, and this is the case for several Pokemon. So if you're to start a battle with a Pokemon that evolves via Stone, it levels up in the same fight, and you finish that fight with a Pokemon that shares an index number with a Stone, any Pokemon that evolves via that Stone will evolve. This includes the Water Stone being assigned to Onix. If you want to evolve a Pokemon with the Moonstone, you would do this with Exeggutor. The Thunderstone, you would do it with Growlithe. The Leaf Stone, you would do this with Psyduck. And the Firestone, you would do with a very specific variant of Missing No, specifically Missing No 0/20. Have fun. That one's not likely to happen, but Firestones are one of the ones you can purchase. The Moonstone is actually a finite item, so this can actually be useful in this case. For now, though, we have a Starmie that evolved without a Water Stone, and I think that's cool, and I think this should be an actual mechanic in the game. I think there should be alternatives to evolving via Stone, just because Stones are a pain in the ass to come by in some later games, most notably Gold and Silver. You will never come across a Stone in your life. So yeah, just keep this in mind. Another thing I forgot to show. Text for all of the binoculars in the game, except for the ones that are west of Celadon City. It's Pokemon Tower. A man fishing. Yeah, these aren't going to be very descriptive. These are the ones that are directly south of Lavender Town. I'll meet you at the next pair. East of Vermilion City. The only way to get from Cerulean City to Lavender Town is by way of the Rock Tunnel. That's true unless you know how to use Fly. It's a beautiful view. Very descriptive. East of Fuchsia City, get ready to suspend your disbelief. Looks like a small island. Okay, maybe that's about Cerulean Cave, but in these ones, a large shining bird is flying toward the sea. These binoculars are not facing the sea. They're facing, like, Saffron City. I don't know how they manage this. West of Fuchsia City, there are people swimming. Pallet Town is in the west. Again, these are not facing that direction. At the top half of Cycling Road, we already checked one of these, but we should look in both. There's a long path over water, that's the one we've already seen. It's Celadon Department Store. Again, that's not what those are looking at, but yeah, you really just gotta suspend your disbelief with this. Anyway, that's all the binoculars. So, something else I forgot to show in Pokemon Stadium specifically is the fact that I was actually wrong about how nicknames affect hues. So, The way this works is it's actually an algorithm that incorporates your trainer name and ID with the nickname of your Pokemon. It just so happens that the way this is determined in-game appears to just be the way, like, nicknames are arranged, whether it's, like, mixing up the syllables or writing the name backwards. These are what Stadium itself does with its NPC trainers to showcase the different hues, but every possible nickname does affect the hue of a Pokemon. Basically, it incorporates your trainer's name and ID with the nickname of your Pokemon to offset the hue by a certain value. Every single nickname does this, even if the effect happens to be unnoticeable, similar to the way Spinda has technically billions of combinations, but a ton of them are just identical. There is a tool on Blue Moon Falls, the same website that was used to shiny hunt for Eevee, that will help you determine the hue if there's a certain one you want to go for, and I actually recommend it. This is really neat that people have, like, solved this in this way. There are actually a lot of event distributions that were done for Generation 1, mostly in Japan and Europe. Most of these are level 5 Mew knowing only Pound, with the trainer ID varying depending on what event it was received from. The only other one we got in the West was the Nintendo Power Pikachu. This promotion gave away no more than 1,000 Surfing Pikachu for mailing an application to Nintendo Power, but there are very likely far less than 1,000, since winners who didn't have a game cartridge still won and received a t-shirt instead. Japan's events aren't too much crazier. It's still a lot of level 5 Mew knowing Pound, but they did get a few more interesting things. They got a Pikachu knowing Fly through a similar process to our Surfing Pikachu by sending applications through Koro Koro magazine, making Japan the only region with a legitimately obtainable flying Pikachu as seen in Yellow version's intro. They also got a Fearow and Rapidash, both of which know Payday. These are notably the in-game fan club chairman's favorite Pokemon, and were available through the Pokemon Stamp campaign that ran in several magazines published by, forgive me for butchering this, Shogakukan. The best one, though, is a level 15 Magikarp knowing Dragon Rage instead of Tackle. Only 30 players who completed the professor exam during the Tamamushi University campaign were selected to win this Magikarp. This Magikarp is referenced by Erica in Pokemon Adventures, the manga, who mentions research into Magikarp going on at Celadon University. This Magikarp is notable for being the fastest possible user of Dragon Rage at level 15, making it able to tear through Pika Cup in Pokemon Stadium, while maintaining flexibility to have a different Pokemon be your level 20 on any given team. But you're not one of the 30 winners of this Magikarp, so who cares? With that, I don't really have much more to talk about. Thank you for joining me for Pokemon Generation 1. This is by far the most ambitious Let's Play I've ever created in so many ways. It's the first project for which I commissioned original artwork. It's the first LP where I have successfully made bios for every single Pokemon that I believe give genuine, good information for how each Pokemon works. It's the LP where I have worked with by far the most people to make it a reality. It's the LP that has by far my favorite team I've ever put together. I can't stress just how much it feels like everything just lined up for this project. I'm extremely proud of how it turned out, even if there were some bumps along the road. This is where I want to give my full, final list of thank yous. It basically took a whole team to make this Let's Play what it was, and I would be remiss not to give everyone the thanks they deserve. First of all, thank you to Astrid News VA for playing through the entirety of Pokemon Red and catching all of the version exclusives to send me the save file. It may have seemed like just a few hours out of your day, but I cannot stress enough how much it means that you did that. You saved me so much tedium that I was already feeling somewhat hard needing to play through Blue and Yellow at the same time. A thank you to all of the artists I worked with for this project: Anthony P., JestaPlushGal, Leandro Notado, and Chuffles. All of them did incredible work, and I cannot recommend working with them enough to anyone who wants some sick artwork, Pokemon or otherwise. Unfortunately, circumstances beyond her control resulted in Plush being unable to finish her piece in time, but I promise you will see it when the bio compilation eventually comes out. I will leave links in the description to where you can find each artist for commission work if you're interested. They are what made the bios for legendary Pokemon truly special, and I'm so happy with how all of it turned out. even if I definitely should have commissioned this far in advance of actually starting the series. I personally procrastinated way too hard on that front. I want to thank Aidan Antipop for letting me poke fun at them by naming the Rival and Blue version after them. They were genuinely a huge help with learning more about the competitive scene in Generation 1, and I don't think some of the bios would be quite as good as they ended up being without their help. That Pinsir bio was written entirely by them, and you better believe I threw out my voice for it. Thank you to Aidan! It's tradition. I want to give thanks to Chugga Conroy. This has been one hell of a goddamn year to be a fan of his work. At the time I originally recorded most of this video, it was up in the air whether or not he'd ever return to making videos. Now that he's successfully finished yet another Let's Play and is returning soon with another one, it feels safe to say he is back, and I'm happy about it overall. The bios in this Let's Play are directly inspired by work in his videos, and I'm super happy with how they turned out, to the point that I plan on continuing to do them in every future Pokemon Let's Play I make. This is without mentioning that Chugga Conroy introduced me to a hobby that changed my life for the better. Chugga, I know you're not seeing this, but if you ever do, I just want this bit to serve as a huge thank you for everything you've done. I can't say you're a perfect human being or anything, but I'm glad you're still around, and I'm glad you'll continue to inspire people in the way you did for me. An obvious huge thanks to the staff and community contributors at Bulbapedia and Pokemon Database, and Joe Merrick of Serebii.net. Both of these sites are major sources of knowledge in the Pokemon community, and are responsible for me having as decent enough of a grasp of these games' mechanics as I do. I'd also like to thank Smogon, most specifically the writers and contributors to the write-ups about how various Pokemon function in terms of competitive play in Generation 1. Generation 1 is a pretty niche competitive community, and these write-ups are incredible starting points for understanding how certain Pokemon function. The bios in these videos would not have been anywhere near as informative without having them as a jumping-off point. Thank you to Big Yellow for being the YouTube channel that got me to finally change my tune about Generation 1, subsequently form a hyperfixation on its mechanics, and enter some sort of dissociative state, at the end of which my notes for this Let's Play were just on my Google Docs. Big Yellow's videos and streams are great, Pokemon related or not. I highly recommend their stuff. They're great to actively enjoy or just have on in the background. And I should also mention Plague Von Karma, who is not only one of the people responsible for a lot of Smogon write-ups, but also a great content creator in her own right, who is another part in inspiring this hyperfixation on Generation 1 that's eaten up over a year of my life. I'm going to be real. It was really stressful when the video about Stadium's mechanics blew up the way it did. It's just a lot more attention than I'm used to having on this channel all at once in a time where my mental state was a little all over the place, but it made my day to know Plague Von Karma saw it. Check out her content, and her ROM hack, the Kanto expansion pack, which adds a ton of content to Pokemon Yellow version. Thank you to pikavees, the webmaster of Blue Moon Falls. Blue Moon Falls is an incredible resource for knowledge on the first two generations of Pokemon, and shiny hunting for Eevee would not have been possible without their extremely useful shiny hunting tool. They're a resource to look at if you have questions about any niche mechanics from the first couple generations. And lastly, as always, thank you for watching. This Let's Play has been a lot of fun. Every time I uploaded a video, I was excited to get home from work to read what you had to say about it. You've taught me a lot about these games too. I hope this LP has shown you how much there is to love about the first generation of Pokemon, because it's a lot, genuinely. If you played along, I'm happy to hear it, and if this Let's Play convinced you, even a little bit, to give these games a fair shake, then I'd say I've done my job. I'll see you back here soon for a Let's Play of a game that somehow means more to me than Pokemon. See you guys then.